ban list prediction when? I don't know, man. We're gonna make one eventually, but I don't know if it's quite the time yet. I'm gonna be honest with you, I don't expect a ban list very soon. I don't know if we get one in December. Like, because I simply think that right now, Konami is probably relatively happy with the TCG format. I don't want to talk about is the current format good or is the current format bad, but just in general, I think they're looking at it and they're like, a lot of different decks are viable, nothing is dominating the meta. I think from their perspective, that's a good thing, right? So I don't think they feel obligated to do much about it. And as well as now, after YCS Bologna, I think we're going to be in a very, like, not much is going to happen for Yu-Gi-Oh, right? Like, in the TCG, there's not going to be that much, like, no huge events, no huge product releases in December. It's going to be a while, basically, until the format until we move forward, right? I think it's going to happen somewhere in January, if I had to guess, right? Of course, there are things they could improve about the format, like certain floodgates and some cards that should be hit. And maybe we're going to talk about it at some point in December. I mean, the point about the ban list prediction is that it's supposed to happen before the ban list. So, you know, maybe we'll think about what they could do if they wanted to do something eventually. But, like, I didn't feel like doing it before YCS Bologna, basically, right? Like, I want to wait for YCS Bologna because it's going to be, to my understanding, the last big event of the year. Is there another YCS in the US or somewhere else? I think it's the last one. So yeah, I want to wait for the last event before I do a ban list prediction, basically. Speaking of, I want to talk about the TCG for a brief moment. Just a brief moment. Because there's a YCS this upcoming weekend, of course. And that's on a lot of people's minds that are going to YCS Bologna. And I do want to talk about that for a second even. But we are in a weird situation, or I'm in a weird situation when it comes to TCG content right now. Simply because the format, it's in a weird spot because I feel like everyone already knows what's up, kind of, right? With most of the decks, right? I mean, I don't have to tell you that, like, we don't have to talk about, like, Unchained, Tier, Pearly, Rescue Ace, all these kind of things, right? It's like all this stuff is kind of, like, out there already. There's nothing crazy going on. I have personally tried a little bit to find some other stuff for YCS Bologna, but nothing has really felt better than the decks that are already at the top. It seems really hard. It seems really hard to solve, quote unquote, a meta that looks something like this. I'm just using this for reference. It's the Super Paludo spreadsheet. The link to this you can easily find. It's pinned in my Discord server in the TCG channel. Like, the format is just super wide, as you can see here. Like, of course, yeah, Unchained over the last couple weeks has been performing slightly better than Tier and Rescue. Like, there's so many decks here that have respectable representation in the current format. And that doesn't mean it's a bad format, but it does feel a little weird trying to solve something that is this diverse, right? It's like, are you really gonna find a deck that performs well into 15 different decks or something like that? You know, like, it's and once again, I'm not saying the format sucks, because I actually don't think it does. I actually don't think the format is bad. I think most of the decks here are completely fine. Like, I think Unchained is a cool deck. I think Tier is a cool deck. Rescue Ace is a cool deck. Pearly is a cool deck. Like, I have no issue with the individual decks. It's just the fact that, like, so many different things are viable. It makes it hard to find something that is like a new Hail Mary solution to the format. Because, like, maybe you can find something that counters Unchained or has a really good Unchained matchup. That doesn't mean you're gonna do well in the format, because, hey, 12 rounds of Swiss, you might only play against 2 or 3 Unchained. Like, and then what if your deck doesn't do well against the rest of the format? You know, it's kind of tough, right? So, and on another note, as far as, like, TCG content goes this week, I'm in a weird spot because I feel like I've already put all the information out that I wanted to put out for YCS Bologna, right? I've made the tier list. I've made the tech card tier list, the non-engine tier list. If you haven't seen those, you know, I encourage you to check those out. I've talked about my opinion on almost all of these decks in the pie chart. I've talked about my opinion on almost all of these hand traps and staples. So it's like, at this point, all that's left, pretty much, all that's left for everyone to do for YCS Bologna is just pick the deck you like the most out of 20 options and chuck the non-engine in that you want to play, right? And then practice it and so on and so forth, right? That's what everyone needs to do. That's what I need to do even, right? That's where I'm at. So just to let you know, my process currently for YCS Bologna, I don't consider myself very well prepared for the YCS, by the way. It is probably one of the YCSs in the last like, I mean, 1.5 years or whatever. Probably the one I've prepared for the least, which had a couple reasons. First of all, I've been sick a little bit here and there. I've been busy. I've had other plans. And then when I did have time to prepare for the thing, sometimes I didn't really feel that motivated because of that situation, as I stated before. Like, there's like, okay, I didn't really feel like I needed to practice Unchained or practice Tier or practice Rescue Ace or whatever it is, right? It felt like all those decks are kind of out there. The lists are kind of set in stone, outside of like deciding on the non-engine portion of the decks. And like, I didn't feel super motivated to grind that much for this YCS, right? And so I'm still gonna take it seriously, of course, but it's definitely not one of those YCSs where I feel super well prepared, because whenever I sat down to prepare for the YCS, I just felt a little overwhelmed with the amount of viable decks, and I didn't know like where to start testing and so on and so forth, right? So I just played a bunch of the decks here and there. I tried to find some cool solutions to the format, but nothing I tried felt super convincing. And so I'm just going to tell you, I'm not going to tell you what I'm going to play, because I haven't decided yet either. I'm just going to tell you what my current situation is, and maybe it helps you with your own situation a little bit, right? So I currently have 4 options for the YCS, I think, in my head. There's 4 decks that I'm considering. 2 of those decks are decks that I put into the tier 1 category here. So 2 out of those 5 I'm currently considering to bring for the YCS. And the way I treated this was basically when I started quote unquote testing and preparing for the YCS, right? I knew that the tier 1 decks here were going to be solid options no matter what happens, right? No matter what happens, these tier 1 decks are all solid options, right? No matter what you do, these decks are going to be good, right? And so what I did was I decided, okay, I like 2 of these decks more than I like the others. And at the start of my testing, I was like, okay, I'm going to try to find different stuff, like other solutions to the format, maybe something cool that no one expects, right? And if it doesn't work out, I'm gonna play one of those 2 decks, right? It's kind of like my fail-safe, my option. If nothing else works, I just go back to one of those 2, right? And that's still the case, right? That is still the case. Those 2 are still like my backup options in the back of my head. The other 2 decks are, honestly, they are also on here, but they are way lower on the tier list because I actually don't think they are that good. But it's funny because it's such a non-competitive thing to say. But some of those, 2 of those decks, I would just like to play them. You know what I mean? So even though I'm not telling you which decks they are, people that freaking watch the stream are probably gonna know what they are, man. But 2 of those decks, the only reason I would pick them over the tier 1 decks are because I want to, right? Because I think basically it's a culmination of things, right? Because I am a hyper competitive player, right? And that's always what I kind of fight against in these situations, right? Where there's a deck I really like, but it's technically not the very best deck in the room, so I technically don't want to play it. But for this particular YCS, there's a couple things that makes me consider it, right? Because first of all, I haven't put infinite hours into this event anyways, right? So I am not super well prepared. I am not super tryharding for this YCS because I simply wasn't that motivated and didn't have that much time. The circumstances just didn't arrange for me to this time to really try hard for this YCS, which is okay. Honestly, that's okay. It happens. And so I'm still gonna take it seriously, but it's not as serious as if I had spent the last 2 months grinding for this YCS, right? So that's the one reason why it would be okay for me to play something that's slightly, just like a comfort pick, maybe you could say. And then as well, the other thing is, I still think these decks can perform well. Like all of these decks in tier 2, for example, I still think they have a good chance of performing well because the format is freaking super, super wide, right? The format is super, super wide anyways. So it's like, it's not like these tier 2 decks are infinitely worse than the tier 1 decks, right? And so I was like, my thought process is, on another hand, is like, if I ever get a chance to play one of these decks, it's probably now, right? Because they are as close as possible to tier 1 decks as they probably ever will be, right? So I don't know, if you look at the tier 2 here, you can probably spot the 2 decks I'm talking about, that I would love to play them if they were you know, top tier, but I'm not sure if I'm gonna have the guts to do it. I'm not sure if I have the guts to do it. But yeah, that's basically where I'm at, right? That's basically where I'm at with my YCS Bologna prep, right? I've experimented with some stuff. It hasn't worked out to my liking. And so now I'm just between, do I just pick a tier 1 deck that I like the most, or do I just pick like a comfort pick, because at least, you know, worst case, I'm gonna have a good time playing it, and they still have a good chance of doing well, right? So that's basically my situation right now. So yeah, and this is not a complaint, basically. I'm not complaining about the diverse format right now. I'm just saying, like, yeah, this is the situation I'm in. I'm gonna try to make the best of it, and we're gonna see how it goes. And maybe that is helpful for some people who are in a similar situation, because even though I don't think the format sucks, I do think deck choice is very overwhelming when there is 20 different decks, right? So yeah, that's where I'm at right now. That's where I'm at.